Okay, now if we can all settle down again after the coffee break. Thanks. This time I invite you to share your thoughts on teaching and learning experiences that you've encountered at uni. I'm really keen to hear about what's working and what you think is in need of our attention so that we can provide students with a worthwhile learning experience.
I'm happy to start again. I think one of the hardest things is how much time we spend in our clinical labs. I feel sometimes that they're so rushed that I'm actually not prepared for prac.
We had a clinical lab session the other day on cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The demonstrator started by telling us the basic steps of CPR. After 5 minutes, he had us look at one of the simulation mannequins and explain how it was required to clean between users for infection control reasons, and then he demonstrated the procedures for only one person and then for two people, one for the airway and one for the compression. We got to see the techniques and used to open the airways and ventilate the lungs, as well as how to compress the chest. This was good because he stopped after each step and asked us if we had any questions. Then we were allowed to practice, and there was only 10 minutes left of the laboratory time left. The tutor moved around the lab looking on students and seeing if they're doing the right thing, but after lab I wondered if I'd be able to perform CPR for a patient for real, but I just didn't think I could, and it really made me scared.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I had to insert an IV in that patient the other day. In the labs, I had no problems, but on prac, it was terrible. I knew all about the procedure, but I just couldn't get the cannula in the vein. The patient was looking at me, and I thought, I can't do this. In the end, the supervisor stepped in and did it. It felt dreadful.
Yeah, I know. In the lab, it's not like you're doing it on a real person. It's not like you're scared of hurting the mannequin.
Yeah.
At least the clinical labs are worth going to.
Yeah, that's true. Lectures are the worst. I've yet to come out of the lecture and go, wow, that was great.
Yeah, I know, right. I don't even bother going to lectures anymore. In my opinion, lecturers fall into 3 categories. There's the narrator, who reads off the slides word for word. Like, seriously, I know how to read. Then there's the airhead. Their teaching seems so disorganised, and they're all over the place. It doesn't really make sense to me, and I'm sure they know their content, but they don't know how to teach it. Then there's the VIP, you know the type. They come in and they expect everyone to hang off every word they say. They make it clear no one else knows the subject, and as well as them, and only their opinion counts. I mean, the professors know their stuff, and they might be good clinicians, but some of them suck at teaching.
That's a bit harsh. We had some good sessions.
I know, you're right. I suppose there are some good ones.
What do you think of PAC lectures? I get so frustrated in them. The lecturer has like hundreds of PowerPoint screens, and it's a race to get through them. They talk so fast that I can't scribble down any notes. And once I do, she's already moved on to something else, so I think, why bother going?
Well, I don't bother going to the lectures now. I watch the recorded ones instead. At least you can pause it whilst you make notes and go and check something out back in the text.
Yeah, I tend to do that if work clashes with my lectures. Some of the recordings are terrible though. I watched one last night and the camera only captured what was on the slides, so every time the lecturer do something on the whiteboard and chatted about it, I had no idea what was going on.
I wonder if the lecturers ever look back at the recording of their lecture. If they did, maybe they could change some things.
I remember I was in this lecture and the lecturer was all like blah blah blah. I just checked my emails halfway through it. But I wish they just put graphics in there to, make it exciting or lighten it up or make sense of the topic or something.
Yeah. It really depends who the lecturer is and how they run their sessions. I've had some great tutorials and seminars where I really feel like I'm getting something out of them. I find it helps when we do real things that I can see and that are relevant to prac.
Yeah, same for me. I really enjoyed yesterday's session on medication administration. The lecturer had us working on the internet, researching actual cases where medication errors had occurred, and then he discussed the principles of medication administration, the legislation guiding it, and the process to ensure safe administration. Then we analysed some of the cases against the information and looked at what may have led to the error being made. It was quite scary seeing how easily things could go wrong, but it helped to make me more aware of what to do to avoid the errors on prac.
That sounds great. In my tutorials, we have to work in groups on the presentation. I don't mind working in groups, but I stayed up late last night trying to do this work for this guy who never showed up and just doesn't do the work he's supposed to.
Yeah, I hate that they get the same mark, even though they didn't do anything.
Worst bit though is we have to sit through some awful student presentations. When that happens, I don't get much out of it at all. You think there'd be something done to make sure that the presentations are up to scratch and we don't end up sitting around bored and doing nothing? Or maybe they could plan for us to do something completely different in tutorials, rather than just oral presentations.
The best experience I had in a tutorial was when the tutor made us act out a court case scenario about a man who died from pulmonary embolism. It was about a deep vein thrombosis and the PE, and the lecturer had made up this case to make studying the subject very interesting. She split us into groups and we had to either be nurses, doctors or pharmacists. In our group, we had to prepare poster-sized exhibits which reflected their role in looking after the patient with DVT.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, the two students were given scripts to act out the role of either the prosecution or defence counsel and called upon the groups of witnesses to present the exhibits. The exhibits covered things like physiology of blood vessels, blood flow and clot formation, signs and symptoms of DVT, and DVT prevention and management. The lecturer was the judge and kept the session on track. Once the witnesses had presented the exhibits, the judge asked a group of students who had not had an acting role to be the jury. They were left to examine the case and all the exhibits and work out if anything went wrong in the patient's case, in which a group of professionals made the mistake. The jury had to present their decisions with a reference to exhibits. We got to talk about the case afterwards and say whether we agree with the jury's decision, and if not, why not. I learned more in that 2-hour session than I could ever have in a lecture or reading a text, and it was so fun.
Yeah.
Funniest thing I saw was when 2 lecturers did this role on a renal colic. We were expecting the usual lecture, and then they opened up with this role play. They built in different aspects of renal colic. Like the one acting nurse said, "Oh, Mr. Smith, you look very pale and sweaty." And then the one acting as the patient grabs this water spray and sprays his face and then grabs a container with flour or something and dabs it all over his face. The role play presented things in a funny way for about 15 minutes, and then they asked us to work with our neighbours on things like identifying the signs and symptoms and then discussing the pathology responsible for these changes. The only time the PowerPoint was used was when the lecturer showed us some images that could help us understand what was going on with the condition.
I was at that session when, in my final examination, when questions about renal calculi and colic came up. I felt like I really answered those questions well because of that session.
I wish we'd done something similar to that when we were studying diabetes. The problem with diabetes is that there's so much information out there. When I googled diabetes, there were literally thousands of sites. So I just used the ones that come up first, figuring they were okay because they had the most hits. Maybe the lecturers need to provide some guidance on this to help us work out what is relevant.
You can't beat Wikipedia for information. It's all there. I don't know why the lecturers don't refer us to it more.
Okay, look, I think we'll have to stop now because we've used up the time that we've set aside. But I really want to thank you for your time, and also our Dean is also extremely grateful for the time that you've taken to chat with us. We'll most definitely take into account your opinions as we move forward with the new look curriculum, so thanks a lot.